I think the real aha moment as we've evolved the company from formats to data was the discovery through our research that video was miscategorized upwards of 88.98% of the time. How can you have a discussion about good targeting, good placement, good creative, good anything if you can't even agree on what it is somebody's watching? That was the moment that just struck me where it was like, wow, okay, we've got something.
Today on the ADOTAT Show, we've got Zack Rosenberg, founder of Cortex and destroyer of outdated video taxonomies. While most of ad tech is still tagging content like it's 2006, Zack's building real AI that actually understands video. No cookies, no creepy tracking, just pure predictive intelligence. Let's get into it.
Multi-billion-dollar complex federal court litigation. We do it day in, day out. And we've built a team dedicated to doing nothing but keeping you safe in the most dangerous litigation in the world. We're comfortable where everybody else is horribly uncomfortable.
And with the litigation piece, we bring the compliance piece, right? That's what I'm adding. That's what my entire team is adding. We've built TCPA World only for you folks to help.
And now the host of the ADOTAT Show, the Dean of Data, the Rabbi of ROAS, the Prince of Performance, the Sultan of Strategy, the one, the only. Give us a huge applause to Pesach Lattin!
Welcome to our interview series where we politely ask the tough questions right before flipping the table and seeing what spits out. Today's guest is Zack Rosenberg, founder and CEO of Cortex, the AI company refining how we understand video content, one frame, one emotion, one micro moment at a time. Forget contextual targeting light. Zack's building the intelligent brain for video advertising, slicing, dicing, and predicting in real time without creepy surveillance nonsense. Zack, before we start carving the industry like a Thanksgiving turkey, quick diagnostic. How is your mental processor this day? Running like a liquid-cooled gaming PC or overheating like a Dell laptop circa 2003?
I think that depends on the hour. As I often say, being a startup entrepreneur, every day is the best, worst day of my life. It depends on the minute that you ask me. I would like to say that I'm running like a super liquid-cooled computer, but I just had some coffee just before this, so that might have something to do with it.
So give me the last moment when you thought, this right here, this is why I do it. Was it tech magic, a client epiphany, or just a really good revenue report?
I think the real aha moment as we've evolved the company from formats to data was the discovery through our research that video was miscategorized upwards of 88.98% of the time. How can you have a discussion about good targeting, good placement, good creative, good anything if you can't even agree on what it is somebody's watching? That was the moment that just struck me where it was like, wow, okay, we've got something. If this is what the big verification providers are offering, or SSPs, DSPs, if this is what they think is going on out there, man, we're onto something.
Video now accounts for 82% of global web traffic, but according to you and many, over 89% of it is mislabeled, misunderstood, or just ignored, completely ignored by ad tech. So you scan every frame, every tone, and every micro moment in real time, and you just don't do lazy text scraping or broken taxonomies. So what exactly is video intelligent? Are we talking predictive intuition, or are we just playing Where's Waldo with keywords?
I love that question for a whole host of reasons. Can we spend the next hour on that? You probably would rather not. Okay, that's fine. No, that's fine. We'll do less than an hour. But there are so many different ways we have discovered throughout this process of how people are trying to understand video. The first is that they're using just the metadata that somebody puts in there. But you make videos, I've made videos in the past. What do? You put in the first clever thing that comes to mind, you tag it with the first 3 or 4 keywords, which would be the same 3 or 4 that anybody else does. You call it a day and off you go, right? That's what everybody does, whether they're posting to YouTube or they're a large media company. And so you can't really trust or rely on the metadata. The second thing that we found happens all the time is that they're looking at the page where that video is living and saying, this page is about this, therefore the video is about that.
Well, and that's not always the case. Sometimes the videos load and one video comes after another and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the page. A person might be watching a YouTube video that originally had to do with the page, and then they say they want to learn about cats or dogs.
And we found that the videos often change every 6 hours.
Okay.
So what you thought it was versus what it actually is changes on a perhaps minute-by-minute basis, right? So there's typically, to your very point, no correlation at all between the page content and the video. The third method we find to be the most prevalent when you get access to the video content is you look at the transcript. But I pulled out a whole bunch of examples, and I think I posted one on our blog recently where the only word uttered in the video was whoa. Well, is that a car crash? Is that a goal being scored? Is that a gift being given? woe is meaningless to you and me, and is certainly meaningless to the machine as well. Now, luckily, that video just happened to be about minions, which everybody loves, but you could see why that would be pretty questionable if you're a marketer. And so what would the taxonomy have classified that as? It wouldn't have. I mean, none of those three methods would have made any sense for it. So you actually have to look at the content and use kind of a multimodal approach to look at the sight, sound, and motion to really come up with what the video is about. I did it in less than an hour. I hope you appreciate it.
How big a problem is what we're calling invisible bias, where machines think they're labeling content neutrally, but they aren't? For example, the algorithm that thinks that every black family equals urban lifestyle.
So we have a set of tools called inferred audiences, which uses the content itself to determine who we believe the audience is. And we take about 5 different factors of the content into account, and we score it from 0 to 2. To say, yes, this actually is geared towards an African-American audience, or, hey, this is just, about sports, but there happens to be different representation within the content. It's not an unsolvable problem the way that some things might be, and we found that our scoring system is pretty good at understanding maybe what they're talking about in context, talking about going to college. Is there different representation in the video, meaning different types of faces? Are they in a college setting? All these different things can help us understand, yes, this is about college students. Great. Therefore, the content is geared towards them as well, and you don't need or have to rely on cookies and 1,000 other things that are outdated and useless at best.
So multiple choice question here. Bad video targeting is like A, sending a wedding invite to your ex, B, putting mayonnaise in everything, or C, trusting big data built in 2011.
Oh boy. Well, I don't particularly think I want to do any of those things, but I would say trusting the data from 2011 is actually an improvement over what I feel is happening today. Most of the data actually comes from 2006 and deprecated taxonomies that are still being used at full bore today as if they are created today. Sending an invite to the ex, boy, that would be tragic. I hope I never do that.
Because I think I just wrote about Viant was using taxonomies from when they bought MySpace from people from a decade before to start sending them ads, where of course their interests had changed enormously.
Yeah, and when you look, the taxonomies were not built for today's ecosystem, and they were built as a kind of a placeholder, and that's why they update the taxonomies every few years. But most of the time, we did a survey of our SSP partners. We found that 80% are still using 1.0. 80%. Again, from about 2006.
So why is the industry still clinging to a system that's, let's just say, as modern as a Blockbuster card?
That's a great question. So I think the obvious answer is it's easy and nobody's challenged it. Or maybe nobody's challenged it really in a way where people understood what the difference can be. Now, when you're going into a DSP and you had 50 million options to choose from, I could see where that would be so cumbersome and you would lose people, right? If I had to start typing in individual keywords, what would that map back to? It's just very easy to go and say, I want sports, I want travel, I want weather. Yeah, okay. If that's what the buyer is, kind of built to do, but now the buyers are getting AI assistance. Now the AI is getting assistance. It's no longer necessary to be so reliant on these old world taxonomies, and frankly, they're pretty meaningless to begin with, right? Sports could mean everything from, the soccer match yesterday to somebody who's betting on sports. These are not the same things if you're a marketer, and obviously the nuance makes a difference.
So do you have any examples of where a bad taxonomy just bombed what could have been a great campaign?
Thousands of them. In terms of what bombed a campaign, the one that I often like to highlight is the idea of, and I won't name which airline, but an airline who found a whole bunch of videos with airplanes in it. What they didn't understand is that those airplanes were not making it to their destination.
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would take full credit for your meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Well, I remember you told me about this last time, about the plane crashes, I think.
Yeah. So, that's a big distinction because, when taxonomies are showing that it's about travel, that's all you have to go on. And so you're going to start making decisions. But this is, a very obvious area where nuance matters.
So I want to know a little bit about your moments. How does that fix a basic human error in categorization? Because if humans still can't label cats correctly, I'm really worried about our future.
It's funny because cats is where we started with our labeling and our self-learning models. So
well, it's you
I do think we figured that one out, but I understand what the issue is. Is it a lion? Is it a cat, right? When when it comes
Or
to
cats
the
people.
moment level understanding, let's take a news program as an example, right? Typically, of a 60-hour, 60-minute program, the first 10 minutes or so are going to be hard news. And it could be about those plane crashes or, things that obviously you don't want to be associated with. But the next 50 or so minutes, minus commercials, is going to be about building playgrounds in your community. It's going to be about the local Girl Scouts raising $10,000. It's going to be about the local sports star who went on to the pros. All things that you as a marketer would love to be associated with. But what do? We block news entirely because we don't know the distinction between these two things. And I don't think that's the solve, right? We need to invest in news. We certainly need it. But every RFP I think I've ever seen in the last 3 or 4 years has a huge exclusion for news for this very problem, which I believe we can now solve.
So a lot of the people I've spoken to, especially in the video world, tell me that their system is creating taxonomies by AIs, but it honestly looks like a hungover intern with a spreadsheet. How much is that?
That must be a very busy intern to go through all that. And if it's going to be manually done, what an insane problem to try to fix. Just since I started the company, there was about 17,000 years worth of video content. Now with generative tools and the pace at which we're seeing new content, we think that's going to be 100,000 years by the end of 2025. If you're not building a sophisticated set of systems to really understand video content at scale, it's going to be impossible. And video is really difficult to do in the first place, which is why, going back to what we talked about earlier, everybody looks for all these proxies, right? I don't actually want to deal with the video content in any way, shape, or form, or maybe I can't get access to it, or whatever the case may be. So we'll guess, or we'll use the broadest level categories possible. So am I convinced that everybody has taken this level of understanding? No. I'm talking to every company under the sun within our space to show them what we offer, and I'm not hearing a whole lot of people say, oh, yeah, of course, just like what we do. What I tend to hear is that they can do that for page level understanding, which makes sense. But that has nothing to do with the video, as we talked about earlier as well.
So let's say that Cortex throws a funeral for the old taxonomy system. What are we going to write on the tombstone?
I feel like what we would put on that tombstone is, don't bury me yet. As we talked about with many of the ecosystems still using these old taxonomies at scale, I think it's a little too premature to put them underground, which is not necessarily the right answer. But it's certainly what I see and hear and feel every single day. I suppose I'd say, don't put the 2025 as the end date just yet.
Speaking of things that are out of date, let's talk about old assumptions around audience targeting and why content tells you more about than creepy third-party cookies could ever. Audience targeting used to mean building the creepy dossiers that we talked about, thicker than a Tolstoy novel. Zach, now you say that content behavior, what we watch, what we actually absorb, is actually the window into who we are. Are we finally admitting that demographics are about as predictive as astrology?
I sure hope so. Well, when it comes to astrology, I think my mother and wife would challenge that, but that wasn't really the point of your question. So when it comes to content and what we call content alignment, let's go to demographics for a second, because I think that's really the crux of your question. And sticking with my wife here, we're about the same age. We don't buy the same products, and we have some overlapping interests, but
and probably not the same clothes, right?
That's probably not. Although she does steal a lot of hoodies, as if we're still in college. But my sons and I are all the same gender. We don't really buy or have similar interests, right? So you have to go with ands, not ors, when it comes to demographics. And the more ands you include, the less likely you are to be accurate in any way, shape, or form. So you have to be this age and this geo and, right, in order to try to predict behavior, which I find to be foolish. Let's go there. Now, when it comes to the content that someone consumes, there's absolutely a correlation between that content and not only the audience, but broadening the audience. Let me give you a perfect example of that. So Premier Protein, the protein beverages, target certainly a similar demographic, women of a certain age, so on and so forth. And that tends to align with content like Pilates, fitness, health, yoga, things of that nature. Except for we saw a 30% increase in brand metrics when they targeted family and parenting content. So was that really their demographic in the first place if you're seeing a 30% lift when the benchmark is closer to 0.55%? The trigger was the content itself, not the demographic. And especially when you're looking at cookies, this is built on several weeks worth of data. So what I was interested in 2 weeks ago probably has nothing to do with what I'm interested in now. The content is the only thing that's absolutely real time. If I'm watching a cooking show or a home improvement show, my interest in those topics is now, not 2 weeks ago. I don't think, speaking of demographics, I don't think what happened 2 weeks ago is a predictor of what I'm interested in today either.
So are we talking about micro intent or major life decisions here?
I think that depends on the nature of the content, but there's certainly content out there that is geared towards that big life event. You know, I'm having a baby, the how-tos, how to build a deck, anything along those lines. But the micro stuff, just as influential. Where are the best places to eat? You know, what am I making tonight for dinner? I think it certainly swings in all directions, and the content is a better indicator into who you are and what you're interested in than anything else. It's not contextual. And I want to make that distinction as well, right? If you think about a library or a bookstore, contextual is putting all the books related to gardening in the gardening section. Content alignment is actually reading the book and saying this part about the book has something to do with gardening, therefore this would be a perfect opportunity to be relevant or related. And maybe it's not even about gardening, maybe it's about a new home because it's about where I want to live and what I want it to look like. So that's what I see as the distinction between contextual and content alignment.
So how fast is the lag now between content consumption and real-world behavior, and can you predict when I'm going to fix my kid's sink?
Never. I'll just jump to the second part first. If you're going to do what I'm going to do, it's just kick it or yell at it until hopefully something changes, or just move.
I just hired a contractor, actually. I gave up. I watched all the DIY videos and tried to.
That is certainly what happens in my house as well. I often joke that whenever my kids see something breaks, even if it's just something small, it takes one screw back in and it's fixed. They're like, oh, is our handyman coming? No, I got this one. They're like, really? Are you sure?
Yeah, I live in a 1950s house that really wasn't built for lasting this long, I think. I mean, it has a lot of the nice bricks and stuff, but the thing, the pipes and stuff I don't think are meant to be 60, 70 years old.
Ours is 125 years old, and I'm pretty sure I have to just push it back into place, every couple months just to make sure. But
so would you rather bet your ad dollars on what someone watched last night or what they Googled 2 months ago?
I think the answer is very clearly what they watched last night. Going back to the same discussion about cookies, what they Googled 2 months ago, they probably forgot about themselves, and yet they're still being retargeted from now till forever, based on that search history. The content you consume is the only thing that's real time and in the moment, and certainly a much greater predictor of where your headspace is. And it's not just about watching how-to videos. I mean, there are plenty of examples of content and content themes, shows, movies, TV, where the brands are trying to integrate themselves into the content itself, right? I mean, this is obviously where they feel consumer behavior is being changed today, and we're just putting that at scale.
So contextual targeting says golf ad on a golf video, but content alignment says this viewer is dreaming about a first-class upgrade, and Rolex says even if they're watching golf. Zach, when did you realize the old rules needed to get thrown in the recycling bin?
I first started to feel this when we started the company many years ago as a sports media entity, and we're looking for sponsorships and different advertisers to fit into the content. And then we started to realize, well, what if we didn't know what the content was? And actually, what if the content was talking about certain aspects of sports or life or whatever the case may be? And just like you'd notice on TV, those things don't necessarily translate to any one contextual box or another. And so that epiphany that, the content was trying to say something, you got to listen. And how do you build a system around that was that aha moment, as far back as 2019, even before the company really, became the company. So, I can't tell you it was any one particular moment or another, but I would say feels obvious when you say it out loud, but when you're in meetings with marketers, it's like, well, that doesn't make sense.
So are we matching emotional states, purchase drivers, aspirations? Are we Freud or Facebook?
Good question. So I would say that certainly your consumption, your behavior is a greater predictor of outcomes. And I think we are still in inning 2, inning 3 of being able to make that understanding. So I'd say we're more in the theoretical than the practical at this stage. And even with billions of data points on, millions of campaigns and being able to look at the correlation between content, consumer, and consumption, whatever outcome that they're looking for, I'd say that it's still early days to really being able to pinpoint one thing or another. But it's clear that there is a correlation, and we hope to spend the next however long figuring that question out.
Loud here, how much of this is, there's like this huge cornucopia, this plethora of content out there that didn't exist. How much of this is that now we, as consumers, we're actually more picky about the content we watch?
I would say that the patterns in content consumption have, I want to say expanded, but that's not necessarily the word I'm looking for. I would say
I remember when YouTube came out, I watched everything. Now I ignore pretty much 99% of what I see content-wise. It's no longer interesting to me. There's, a video scrolling by me every 5 seconds, so I only pick that 1% of video.
Right, but I think the types of things you're watching have probably expanded, right? Because I do think
I sometimes watch, artistic stuff that I'll never do, but it's interesting. I like the designs. I think about how that might look in my house, for example.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things I found is that among all the content consumption, shows and movies in particular get more lost in the fold. Right? I feel like in terms of like movie trailers, that used to be something that a big movie was coming out, you'd see that movie trailer everywhere, and now all of a sudden I feel like it's getting kind of drowned out. And I think that has a lot to do with just the amount of video clearly that's being pushed out every single day, but not necessarily the quality of video. I do still think that the quality of video can rise to the top, so long as you're not trying to mix it with, every creator on the planet. That's why television commercials, I think, are still incredibly valuable and a bright future, as highly produced, highly quality video content is the key to success, as long as you know where to find it and how to align with it.
What's the most misunderstood about this? Is it the machine vision, sentiment analysis, gut instinct?
I think it's the change in the audience behavior. Meaning, I think where marketers still get stuck is the idea that the content can be used for understanding the audience and the demographics, and not just sticking to the age-old, gender, demo, region, right? We built our entire way of being around these fundamental principles, and that's why the cookie conversation over the last several years has been so dire for so many, because it would force everyone's hand to start thinking about the world a little bit differently. I think for the better, but I understand if you've invested billions and billions of dollars in thinking this way, it's hard to just flip the switch.
5 years from now, will content alignment be a baseline expectation, or will we still be fighting keyword zombies?
I think we're always going to be facing the keyword zombies, for better or worse, just as we're still using the taxonomies from 2006. I don't think that's going to change in the next 5 years. But I certainly think that the systems buying are going to change considerably over the next 5 years. The automation, the scalability, use of yes, machine learning has been part of advertising for a long time, but the ability to go deeper, further, at scale, open up the aperture is certainly going to change over the next 5 years. Yes, content alignment should absolutely be taken into account, because as the explosion in content happens, again, that 100,000 years worth of video content that we think is going to be out there by the end of the year, you have to know how that message is going to align and resonate with the audience. And that's going to be an extension of your creative. How are you going to talk to them? There's plenty of generative tools that are going to change the messaging based on who's watching, but knowing what they're watching should impact that just the same, as it should for your media planning and your audience development, right? We talked about that example, family and parenting. Well, you are going to need to build campaigns to specific segments, talking to them in very different ways. The idea of one message to everybody, looking for the Super Bowl every single day and just hoping your audience is among them, that's going to disappear in 5 years. There's no need for that.
So my favorite part, you're shipwrecked, no Wi-Fi, no Slack notifications, just sand coconuts, and seemingly Bear Grylls, and who'll be probably judging your survivor skills. Zach, what tech skills and people are you betting your life on?
Trust. I won't name names, but I would certainly be the last person I think that everyone would look to for survival on that given island, unless it was about, trying to devise a clever way to get off of it, which would probably sink me pretty quickly. But, there are innumerable people that I trust and, believe would keep me alive on that island. I have an uncle or two who I would certainly hope are with me. But beyond that, I hope that I could tie a rope and not get us killed.
So would you prioritize building a fire, building a shelter, or building an AI model to predict
What's powering this AI model? Because maybe that's the key to getting off the island. I think fire would be the most useful, followed by looking for Wilson from Castaway.
So which of your survival picks, Bear Grylls, Jeff Bezos, would be crack first and start crying? Because as we know, tears are nature's original Gatorade.
Well, here's the one thing that I would say. It would be very helpful to have Bezos, because no matter how long we were on that island, someone's going to continue to keep looking for us. Bear Grylls would certainly be great
And
for
you'll probably
survival.
get Amazon,
Yeah, right, exactly.
even on a desert island.
Exactly. Even if that island is only inhabited with penguins. But, I think that certainly
I don't think the
never...
penguins are allowed. I think there's now like a tariff on the penguins, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, yeah. So I assume any Amazon delivery is going to find their way there too.
Which of your professional skills, negotiation, leadership, or pure stubbornness would actually keep you alive the longest? And you can't say networking.
Oh no.
This is not LinkedIn. You can't LinkedIn a tiger or something, yeah.
Okay, all right. So you're giving me one hand tied behind my back, huh? All right, that's fine. So I think my stubbornness, but more my hustle, would probably be the best survival tool that I've got. I certainly wouldn't relent on the problem. That doesn't mean I'd solve it, but I certainly wouldn't relent on it.
Would you trade your AI stack for a satellite phone or a well-trained carrier pigeon? Because carrier pigeons don't crash.
Yeah, but how do they fare in the stormy weather that I assume was the reason that we ended up on that island in the first place? I would say that at the moment, I will keep the tech stack.
If you had to start a company on the island that was marketing cognates to the mainland, what would be your first ad slogan? And you get bonus points if you can make it rhyme.
Go nuts for coconuts?
Okay, yeah. You are not a branding person. You're an AI person.
I was going to say...
I should mention that to people.
All right, I can work on that, and I can come back with a revision.
So is survival on a desert island, is it 10% muscle and 9% mindset, or is that true or false?
I imagine it's the other way around. I think it's going to take a lot of brawn in order to survive that, and I think that the head strength necessary to get yourself out of that is probably limited, since you probably won't be able to think very straight for very long without food or water or any of those sorts of things. So I would think it's the other way around.
So I want to talk a little bit about your personal philosophy, what you're really made of. You're running a bleeding-edge AI company while raising 3 boys. You're either heroic or it's like a form of self-torture, and I speak from experience. Off the record, but obviously still on the record, how are you doing this without snapping like an old guitar train?
Well, I often joke that between the startup and my 3 boys, my wife still gets 90% of my time. So I guess you're going to have to ask her. Going back to that very point, yes, you have to have an incredible support system. I think that's the answer to every question related to how do you continue to do what you're doing in any way, shape, or form. So I am incredibly lucky to have the family support that I have, and the amazing kids, and the fact that one of them is old enough to go to college and take care of himself. Also
it gets expensive. I've had kids in college.
Sure. Yeah. No.
Just so your startup better work out.
I say that every single day. Either that, or I better hope that he graduates and makes $1 million a month as soon as he does, and support the rest of the family. But for right now, I think we've got it.
So how much of this is balance or strategic neglect?
Well, I think a lot of it's strategic neglect. You have to be able to free up the headspace to focus on one task or another, and that's got to fall on the responsibility of somebody in your life, and you got to have a very amazing, willing partner to take on those responsibilities. Because if I had to think about, planning what the kids are bringing to school today, or getting them dressed, or any of those sorts of things, it takes one less decision that I can make during the day during my real job. So yes, willful neglect, I think, is a very, very important skill.
So one real-life habit that keeps you grounded when the CEO hamster wheel starts spinning at 3,000 RPM. And then you can say video games.
I'm not necessarily into video games, and this is another boring answer, but I really like to work out. So I will do that. I will walk. I try to take as many calls every day walking around the neighborhood, which I find to be not only a benefit from a health standpoint, but here in Montclair, New Jersey, I tend to run into a lot of people who are also in the advertising media ecosystem. And I feel like everywhere I go, I run into somebody I've been meaning to reach out to, or, owe an email to, and there they are. So I find that walking's had the networking benefit. I know, now I can untie that hand, as well as the health benefit.
So I've noticed that kids are better at spotting BS than McKinsey. What's a lesson that you've learned from your kids that no business book or VC mentor could ever teach you?
It's a interesting thing to go down that path, because I have talked about in the past where my eldest used to get these like blueberry, kiwi, strawberry, peanut butter smoothies, and some other stuff that doesn't necessarily feel like it goes together. And of course, each time I would order for him, that we would, he would always ask for it. And I was like, man, this sounds absolutely awful, until the first time I tried it. And to your point, he had no preconceived knowledge that this doesn't make any sense, this wouldn't go well together. and it was pretty good. And then I realized, hey, it's just kind of like an acai bowl, same kind of idea there, or yogurt. I put all the same things in, and maybe these things do go together. So I think that lack of fear around stigmas or this or that, I think that's a lesson that my kids have certainly taught me. Just go for it.
So what if success cost you everything? Family, health, friends, would you still chase it?
Absolutely not. No. To be in a world of success and not have any of those things around you is not success. I don't want to wish any of these scenarios, so I'm not even going to utter them out loud, but if there was something family-wise that precluded me from doing this job, that would be about the only thing in the world that could stop me.
If you could upload one personality trait into your team, like a matrix-style upgrade, what would it be? And you can't answer empathy unless you really mean it.
This is one that, not just for my team, but every team. I think that everybody in the world thinks they're a great communicator, and I find that most people in the world are not. So I think that there's always improvements that can be made in communication, and if I could bestow that upon everybody, not just in my organization, but externally too, that is an area where I think the world can use some great improvement.
When you look back 20 years from now, what would you be prouder of, the tech you built or the humans you raised?
Certainly, the easier answer is the humans I raised. The reason I stumble and hesitate is because the reason I'm doing this, the reason that I'm building the tech, the reason that I'm building the business is to make sure that they can reach that pinnacle of their success. So there is certainly no doubt that this endeavor should lead to their success, and that's the reason I pursue it.
And that's a wrap, and now comes the most painful part of the show, is where we get everyone to try to dance.
And that's a wrap on the ADOTAT Show. Huge thanks to Zack Rosenberg for joining us and casually dismantling the entire foundation of video targeting like it was a 12-year-old's Minecraft server. We learned that your contextual targeting is about as accurate as a Roomba with a vendetta, that taxonomies built in 2006 are still haunting your media buys, and that content alignment, not creepy surveillance, is the future of understanding what people actually care about. Big shout out to our sponsors, incremental.com, because incrementality shouldn't require a PhD in guesswork. And Troutman Amin, the legal muscle you want in your corner when ad tech gets messy, which is always. Next week, we're talking with Jules Minviel, the French dynamo who co-founded both Mizzou and Augury and is now leading the charge at Olizon. Expect wisdom, wild stories, and probably something very disruptive said in a charming accent. Until then, stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.